What is The Bad Batch? Really, what is it? Because for such a well-animated show, it seems to have no idea what it is. Specifically, it has no internal consistency with its tone, and it's that inconsistency that drags the show down. It prevents it from being anything more than mediocre. Sure, it has some great episodes, but because it doesn't know what its tone should be, the show as a whole cannot reach its full potential. In this video, I want to discuss the tone, why it's inconsistent, and what that means for the story. Let's get into it. If you've watched The Bad Batch, you might have noticed the tone is all over the place. Some episodes feel like they've been ripped directly from a kid's show. Other episodes rival Clone Wars stories like Umbara in terms of maturity and subject matter. It can be incredibly jarring. Watching it from week to week, I never knew what kind of episode I was going to get. Of course, shows aren't the same tone 100% of the time. There are funny and sad moments within most shows, but they exist within a certain range of the spectrum. Characters aren't going to be brutally murdered on sitcoms, and characters aren't going to be cracking non-stop jokes in an apocalypse show. The Bad Batch tries to cover too wide a range, and it makes the show incredibly inconsistent. The tone doesn't slowly build either. Some series mature as they go along, gaining a darker tone. Not The Bad Batch. It oscillates wildly from one end to the other. Look at Season 2. The dark Crosshair episode is immediately followed by the ridiculous tech pod racing episode. I think part of the reason why the tone is so inconsistent is that The Bad Batch doesn't seem to know who its audience is. On the surface, you could say that it's a kid show, and it seems to meet a lot of that criteria: relatable kid character, fun animation, wacky space adventures. But The Bad Batch is a continuation of the Clone Wars, and the audience that watched the Clone Wars has grown up. They enjoy more mature stories. Those stories don't have to be grim and dismal, but they have to be written in a different style. If they wanted to make a show that appealed to that demographic, they should have cut out those unnecessary filler episodes and streamlined the main story. So there are two potential demographics for the show. If The Bad Batch committed to one over the other, it would stand a better chance at succeeding. I would prefer a mature story about the fallout from Order 66 and how the galaxy changes. But if they wanted to make it a kid's show, that's totally fine. Let it be a story about Omega flying around the galaxy learning lessons each week. Kids should have shows too. Sadly, The Bad Batch did not commit. It seems like the writers wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted fun, one-off stories for the kids, but they also wanted to appeal to that older audience. So we're left with this hybrid of kid show and dark tale of rogue clones. A master of none. And you really see this in the dialogue. It's so surface level and simplistic. In a kid show, that's fine. But the topics that the show covers, like the rise of the Empire and clone experimentation, deserve more nuanced writing. Now, I know many of you are probably saying, what about Clone Wars? It was a kid's show, and it still managed to be both fun and serious. That's a fair point, but there's one big difference with the Clone Wars. It's an anthology-style story. Each 2 to 4 episode arc is relatively self-contained. As a result, they can drastically alter the tone from arc to arc. That's how you're able to get episodes like Sunny Day in the Void and The Wrong Jedi in the same season, and it doesn't feel weird. They kept the arcs tonally consistent within themselves. The Bad Batch is like throwing 4 tonally different Clone Wars stories into a blender and coming up with a random order for them. It does not work. Imagine if the Clone Wars told a long, narrative-style story. Then imagine if Captain Rex went from helping out Jar Jar in an episode like Bombad Jedi to fighting an Umbara right afterwards. It would be tonal whiplash. A lot of Clone Wars characters participate in both serious and goofy arcs, but there's separation. The storylines stay within themselves. They don't contribute to some overarching plot. They rarely reference the events of the other arcs. As a result, there are no episodes that feel like filler. There are some episodes that people like better, but none of them are a distraction from anything else. The arc structure also allows the audience to mentally reset and evaluate each story on its own merits. The Bad Batch tries to tell season-long stories, but it also tries to have anthology episodes that don't contribute anything at all. In a well-written show, it's possible to have standalone episodes that still add to the story. For The Bad Batch, however, these anthology episodes cause the overarching narrative to suffer. Take a look at Andor. Each of these mini-arcs are kind of separate, but they all meaningfully contribute to the main plot. Even more important, they are tonally consistent. Every episode maintains the serious tone, and doesn't undermine it by having Andor go pod racing with a sassy droid. It's frustrating, because The Bad Batch has some amazing episodes, but they're surrounded by a lot of junk, and even the great episodes don't reach the height they should, because they're dragged down by the medium they're in. They insisted on maintaining some semblance of a kid's show, and as a result, the powerful moments aren't delivered as well as they should be. Clone experimentation and character deaths are wrapped up in basic dialogue and poorly written story beats. Imagine if Kamino had been destroyed in a show like Andor. It would have been so much more powerful, because the show's tone would be better suited for it. However, since The Bad Batch is the only show set in this time period, they use it to give us meaningful Star Wars moments in a subpar way, and it's a shame to see. But that's just my 2 cents. What do you think? Do you enjoy The Bad Batch as it is? Do you think there's a different problem with The Bad Batch? Let me know in the comments. I'd appreciate it if you consider subscribing, and thank you very much for watching.